Everyone talks about Marx when discussing power, class, and control. But what if the real prophet of our time was a French aristocrat from the 1800s? Alexis de Tocqueville didn't just study democracy, he ripped it open, exposing the quiet forces that shape our minds, our freedoms, and our future. In 2025, his warnings about soft tyranny, conformity, and false equality feel more real than ever. So ask yourself, was Tocqueville not ahead of Marx but beyond him? Let's find out. In the shadow of Marx's fiery manifestos and radical economic critiques, Alexis de Tocqueville might seem like the quieter figure, an aristocrat observing democracy rather than setting fire to capitalism. But in many ways, Tocqueville's observations cut even deeper because he wasn't trying to tear the system down. He was trying to understand how freedom could die silently in the very societies that claimed to value it most. Born into privilege but obsessed with liberty, Tocqueville traveled to America in the 1830s, ostensibly to study its prison system. What he actually discovered, though, was a social experiment unlike any other, a land where equality was the creed, yet something darker lurked beneath. Unlike Marx, who saw revolution in class conflict, Tocqueville saw something more subtle, but just as dangerous: the slow, creeping erosion of individuality. He wasn't shouting on the streets. He wasn't organizing workers. He was whispering from his desk. The greatest danger to liberty lies not in tyranny from above, but in the quiet submission of the people. Let that sink in. While Marx dissected economics, Tocqueville dissected the soul of democracy. And what he found was troubling. People were becoming addicted to equality, even when it meant giving up freedom. They would trade independence for comfort. They would self-censor, conform, obey, not because they were forced, but because they feared standing alone. Sound familiar? In 2025, we scroll through curated feeds, nod along with digital consensus, and call it free thought. We police each other not with guns or batons, but with comments, likes, and outrage. Tocqueville saw it coming almost 200 years ago. He wrote about the tyranny of the majority, where the crowd crushes the individual not with violence but with disapproval. He warned that people would become so obsessed with being equal that they'd stop thinking independently, and he feared that democratic societies, in chasing fairness, might become quietly authoritarian. No gulags, no secret police, just millions of people choosing silence over risk. Tocqueville's sociology wasn't a grand theory of economics or class struggle. It was an X-ray of the human condition under democracy. He wanted to know, why do people surrender freedom when no one is forcing them? Why does comfort so easily replace courage? Can a society love equality so much it forgets what liberty even is? In an age of algorithms, echo chambers, and digital tribalism, those questions burn hotter than ever. So while Marx remains the symbol of revolution, Tocqueville might be the more dangerous thinker, because his warnings weren't about distant class wars. They were about you, your choices, your silence, your desire to fit in, and the invisible price we all pay for it. Tocqueville was obsessed with a paradox. How could equality, something so noble, so empowering, also become a threat to freedom? After his journey across early 19th century America, he emerged with a chilling answer: because equality feels better than liberty. It flatters, it comforts, and eventually it controls. He saw a society where the people weren't begging for kings, they were begging for fairness. But in the chase for sameness, Tocqueville noticed something disturbing. The more people demanded to be equal, the less they tolerated difference. Standing out became dangerous. Thinking differently became suspicious. That's where his sociology hits hardest. Unlike Marx, who divided society into bourgeoisie and proletariat, Tocqueville wasn't interested in class warfare. He was more concerned about social conformity, a more subtle enemy that doesn't overthrow governments but slowly poisons freedom from within. Democratic nations are at risk not from despots but from themselves, he warned. Let's pause there. He wasn't talking about secret authoritarian plots. He was talking about regular citizens, us, willingly embracing comfort and sameness over courage and individuality. In modern terms, cancel culture isn't enforced by the state. It's enforced by the crowd. Surveillance isn't always top-down. Sometimes it's peer-to-peer. And censorship? We do it to ourselves, afraid to say what we think if it's unpopular. Tocqueville predicted it all. He called it soft despotism, a form of quiet tyranny where people aren't locked up, but they're gently guided, corrected, smoothed out until they all behave the same. Imagine an all-knowing bureaucracy. Imagine a culture where opinions are filtered, risks avoided, and compliance feels like safety. Now scroll through your social media feed. See the parallels? This wasn't Marx's angry factory floor. It was the sofa, the algorithm, the polite consensus that keeps everyone calm and utterly controlled. Tocqueville didn't hate equality, but he saw that in democracies, once equality becomes sacred, people will sacrifice anything to preserve it, even their freedom. They'll beg for policies that reduce complexity, flatten nuance, and suppress extremes, because extremes make us uncomfortable, and comfort, to Tocqueville, was the real enemy of liberty. This is the sociology no one teaches, that a society can be free on paper but enslaved in spirit, that you don't need a dictator when you have a mob with moral certainty, and that the biggest threat to your autonomy might be your own desire to blend in. So when you hear politicians praise equality, Tocqueville would tell you to listen closely. Is it equality of opportunity or equality of behavior? Equality of rights or equality of thought? Because the moment everyone starts thinking the same way, someone is no longer thinking. In a monarchy, power wears a crown. In a dictatorship, it wears a uniform. But in democracy, power wears a smile. That's what terrified Tocqueville most. Not the brutal force of oppression, but the gentle erosion of liberty by systems that claim to protect you. He imagined a future where governments don't dominate, they guide, where citizens aren't chained, they're distracted, and where freedom isn't crushed, it's forgotten. Let's talk about the invisible cage. Tocqueville warned that democratic societies risk becoming a nation of children, forever seeking comfort, stability, and fairness, while quietly surrendering responsibility and independence. He foresaw the rise of a state that doesn't terrorize but pampers, one that doesn't command but nudges, one that makes you feel safe but in exchange asks for your soul. This isn't conspiracy. This is sociology. He described a new kind of despotism where laws multiply under the banner of protection, bureaucracy expands in the name of fairness. Citizens give up self-governance for the illusion of control. Sound like 2025 yet? Imagine a world where every aspect of life is regulated, optimized, and monitored, not by dictators, but by policies written to help you. You don't feel imprisoned, but you stop asking questions. You stop choosing. You stop living freely because your world has been so perfectly managed. You don't even realize you've stopped thinking. It covers the surface of society with a network of small, complicated rules and represses freedom more than it protects it. Tocqueville, nearly 2 centuries ago. Compare that to modern digital life. Apps that decide what you see, ratings that decide how you're treated, rules you don't notice until you break them. This is not the revolution Marx predicted. There are no class uprisings here, just people scrolling, nodding, consuming, and quietly losing their agency. Tocqueville's sociology doesn't scream, it whispers, and that's what makes it more terrifying. It doesn't demand you rebel. It asks why you're so calm, while freedom slips through your fingers. His message was clear. The future of democracy doesn't die in riots. It dies in routines, in convenience, in the slow disappearance of public debate, civic duty, and uncomfortable conversations. Ask yourself, when was the last time you challenged a popular opinion out loud? When did you last resist convenience for the sake of principle? When did you last feel truly free, not just safe, but alive? Tocqueville wasn't afraid of revolutions. He was afraid of apathy. Because in a society where everything is managed for your comfort, the greatest act of rebellion might be simply saying, "No, I'll decide for myself." Tocqueville didn't just worry about governments. He worried about us, the people. Not because he distrusted democracy, but because he understood how easily a free society can turn against itself. His sharpest warning: the tyranny of the majority. In monarchies, the danger is the king. In democracies, it's the crowd and its power to crush dissent, shame nonconformists, and silence independent voices. You don't need soldiers when shame works better than bullets. Let's bring this to 2025. You post something unpopular online, you lose followers. You're mocked, canceled, or simply ignored. The message is clear: stay in line or stay silent. That's what Tocqueville meant when he said democracies could become oppressive, not through force, but through collective judgment. I know of no country in which there is so little independence of mind and real freedom of discussion as in America. That was in 1835. He was shocked by how quickly people gave up individual thought to join the majority. He saw Americans priding themselves on freedom, but terrified to speak out if their views went against the grain. And here's the key: no one made them silent. They silenced themselves. Sociology teaches us that social norms shape behavior. But Tocqueville added a brutal twist. The more equal people become, the more they crave acceptance. In a society that says everyone is equal, standing out feels arrogant. Disagreeing feels dangerous, and disagreement becomes taboo. Today, algorithms amplify majorities. Popular opinions are rewarded with likes, shares, trends. Unpopular ones are buried. Consensus becomes currency. Silence becomes survival. This is the tyranny Tocqueville feared. Not laws, but psychological conformity. A world where we don't say what we believe. We say what we're allowed to believe. And that's when freedom collapses, not with a bang, but with a quiet nod. Think about public discourse today. Are people truly debating, or are they defending brands, ideologies, tribes? Are we encouraging diverse voices, or are we filtering truth through fear? Tocqueville's sociology reminds us that even in a democracy, majorities can become bullies, and the cost of their power isn't just silence, it's stagnation. Because if no one challenges the norm becomes law. Not by legislation, but by repetition. He warned that a single voice, no matter how true, could be drowned in applause for the wrong idea, and worst of all, that voice might stop speaking. If we want to reclaim freedom, Tocqueville would say, don't fear standing alone. Don't wait for permission to speak. Don't follow the crowd. Question it. Because in a world where everyone is equal, the most radical act is being yourself. Tocqueville wasn't a cynic. He didn't hate democracy. In fact, he believed it held the greatest promise of human progress. But precisely because he admired it, he took its flaws seriously and exposed them with surgical precision. At the heart of his sociology lies a haunting truth. Democracy doesn't guarantee freedom. It guarantees power to the people, and it's up to them what they do with it. And in 2025, that's the problem. We've built a world of digital equality. Everyone can speak, everyone can post, everyone has a voice. But Tocqueville would ask, does anyone really listen? Has democracy made us stronger or more fragmented, more anxious, more desperate to conform? Here's the paradox. The more we pursue equality, the more fragile freedom becomes. Tocqueville saw that the obsession with being the same breeds fear of difference, and fear of difference breeds repression. He believed that modern democracies would drift toward mediocrity, not excellence. That individual greatness would be sacrificed for collective comfort, and that the greatest danger would come not from tyranny, but from too much peace, too much management, too much control. That sounds absurd, until you remember we don't debate ideas. We filter them. We don't think deeply. We scroll. We don't risk disagreement. We perform agreement. Tocqueville warned us about a society of spectators, people watching politics like a sport, consuming culture like content, forgetting that citizenship is not passive, it's active, demanding, uncomfortable. He saw a future where the state becomes a parent and the citizens become children, fed, protected, entertained, but ultimately obedient. What Tocqueville wanted wasn't revolution, it was responsibility. He wanted us to see that true freedom isn't granted, it's practiced every day, in how you think, in what you question, in whether or not you dare to be unpopular. Forget Marx's factories, forget class wars. Tocqueville's battlefield is in the soul of democracy, and the weapon isn't rage, it's awareness. So what hits harder in 2025? Marx's call to arms? Or Tocqueville's quiet whisper, "You are free, but only as long as you remember what freedom feels like"? Tocqueville didn't write for his time, he wrote for ours. In 2025, his warnings feel less like theory and more like prophecy. The question isn't whether we still have democracy, it's whether we still have the courage to live freely inside it. Call to action. If this made you think differently about freedom, drop a comment. Subscribe for more raw, unfiltered sociology that hits deeper than textbooks. And remember, don't just follow society, understand it.